Thank you for joining us for the 2018 Work First Fellowship Symposium. I am Mario Mangiamelli, and I'm the chair of the Work First Board. So the Work First Fellowship connects young professionals with the opportunity to have a direct impact combating the cycle of urban poverty. Our fellows work one-on-one with individuals living below the poverty level to help them find employment and get back on their feet, while also conducting policy research on effective job placement programs. The fellowship is a year-long endeavor that directly supports the needy while also analyzing public policy that shapes the lives of our clients. We are proud of the work the fellows have accomplished, particularly since their research will inform policy that affects the lives of the community we serve. Today, we look forward to hearing from our fellows whose presentations will cover the varied topics of public health, financial inclusion, social impact, hiring, and more. Now, without no further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Lee Bose, who is the CEO of America Works. Thank you.
We did a project, actually Joel Thomas, who's here, worked with our fellows on sort of some, and he does this with our clients as well, but it's sort of a 6-word that sums up their past and their future. And they're really wonderful. Velvet Vaughn has worked with them on videoing this, and we want to show you this video. So before you meet them and hear about their research, you can actually get a sense of who each of them are and where they're going to be next year. It's very exciting.
Expanding opportunities through compassionate, rights-based diplomacy. Kate Shafer, Georgetown University, MS in Foreign Service. Established the foundation, planning the progression. Adam Schutzman, staying with America Works. From impacting classrooms to education policy. Mikaela Santos, UC Irvine School of Social Sciences. Powering people's prosperous progress past poverty. Jonathan Pizzuti, working in economic development. Shaping policy by fighting for equality. Allison Spivack, policy research and advocacy. From employment skills to employment law. Sarah Eller, UC Irvine School of Law, Class of 2021. Lessons learned in NYC, applied internationally. Sana Johnson, the London School of Economics. Collecting narratives to cultivate compelling change. Ivana Osmanovic, Human Rights Advocacy, Chicago, Illinois. Changing pathways through optimism and advocacy. Rachel Gordon, serving people and our planet. Listening to hearts now using the stethoscope. Laurel Aberle, University of Southern California, Doctor of Medicine. Streamlining systems to achieve measurable results. Tyler Leighton, Public Policy Analyst. Leveraging resources to affect social change. Francis McGinley, Congressional Campaign Staff, Illinois 6th District.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam Schutzman. I'm from the Baltimore office of America Works, and I'm going to talk about how employment services can serve as an alternative to bail. So as a brief history of bail, originally valuables were used as a form of collateral in English 13th century, basically to ensure that people would show up for their trials. Because of fears that this might affect impoverished communities, we added the 8th Amendment to the Constitution, which basically states that excessive bail shall not be required. This was affirmed in the Bail Reform Act of 1966 and 1984, and in a Supreme Court case that confirmed that all individuals have a right to bail, Justice Thurgood Marshall dissented, asserting that a person innocent of any crime can be held indefinitely, which is incompatible basically with the human rights protected by the Constitution. Now, in today's society, there are some issues that still exist with bail. For example, the majority of the jail population, about 450,000 individuals, have not been convicted of a crime, yet are awaiting trial in incarceration. Poor defendants get locked up regardless of guilt, while wealthy defendants have the opportunity to get out because they can afford it. Being in jail, even for a short period of time awaiting trial, can lead to unemployment. It can lead to issues with housing, health care, and you could even lose your children. It has an effect on trial outcomes as well, as people who are incarcerated until their trial are 4 times more likely to be convicted. And just waiting in trial, it decreases your plea bargaining power. There are also inherent racial disparities in the program. As we can see by the chart down here to my left, African Americans and Hispanic individuals tend to be receiving bail values that are higher than their peers. In terms of cost as well, the Pretrial Justice Institute has determined that it costs about $14 billion a year on pretrial services and detention. So multiple alternatives are being pursued. For example, risk assessment, call notification for trial dates, and pretrial supervision. America Works has just started a new option of employment services. Basically, judges will refer pretrial individuals to America Works to go through our job training and to search for employment as an alternative to paying cash bail. For my project, what I wanted to determine was, does enrolling and participating in America Works lead to a better trial outcome? And so what we can see is we had 2 groups. We had 61 individuals who came to America Works, enrolled in our program through pretrial, and stayed until their trial. And we had 34 individuals who were offered the opportunity, but chose not to go through America Works. Now, I wanted to compare positive and negative outcomes. And a positive outcome is basically a not guilty verdict, if a case is dismissed, any kind of case that doesn't lead to a conviction, incarceration, or probation. And what I did is I compared the values in a proportion t-test. Now, looking at the populations, we can see that both groups skewed on the younger end. What we tend to have are individuals where, if we look at the mode, tends to be maybe their first, second, or third misdemeanor. Most of them have not had felonies. And again, it's people who are just entering into the pretrial system. What we saw was that there was an effect, and that going through the America Works pretrial system did lead to a significant difference in pretrial outcomes. The enrolled group had a higher proportion of positive outcomes. We also saw fewer failure to appear in courts. So going through the program, individuals had about a 5% rate of failure to appear in court, as opposed to the group that did not, that was closer to 17.5%. And finally, 26 of our individuals actually obtained employment going through the America Works model, which, is really something difficult, especially when you have an open case. So some recommendations for the future. We believe that implementing employment service programs as an alternative to bail would be an excellent initiative, and it's something that should be followed up in other locations besides Baltimore. Conducting further research on the long-term recidivism effects of employment services. This project was great, but it only lasted 1 year. Looking down the road and seeing 3 years and 5 years down the road what the recidivism rates would look like could have a beneficial impact on the future. Also, repeating the study to analyze failure to appear in courts. And finally, investing in pretrial services and reentry programs pays dividends in the long end. And so I want to thank you guys for being with me now. I'd like to introduce Francis, who's going to be talking about achieving success in employment after incarceration.
So my research centers around fair chance employment, or second chance hiring, in San Francisco. Quick background, America Works of San Francisco primarily serves the formerly incarcerated population. Nationally, we have a major recidivism problem, with 77% of people leaving prison returning within 5 years. Employment is the #1 determinant of reducing recidivism and has been shown nationally in repeated studies to reduce the likelihood of an individual returning to prison by about 20%. So in the work that America Works does with helping clients obtain self-sufficiency, we are also slowing the revolving doors of the criminal justice system. That being said, there's numerous barriers that formerly incarcerated people face when searching for employment. That being said, employers are now considering more and more the possibility of hiring folks with records and implementing second chance hiring at their organizations. But hiring and retaining individuals from this population can require a different process than the traditional applicant background. And that's where America Works plays a critical role in being the bridge from these clients to employment opportunities. And this research aims to uncover some of the best practices in second chance hiring and retention. So I centered my research around 3 questions. First and foremost, what do employers believe allows them to be successful in this? Secondly, what do workers with criminal records believe allows them to be successful in employment? And generally, what about these practices help employers hire and retain individuals with criminal records? So I hypothesized that there would be a discrepancy between what employers believed allowed them to be successful and what employees believed allowed them to be successful. So I surveyed both groups and compared their responses to see if there were any differences. So this graph the chart on the left displays 6 different factors that both employers and employees were asked to rank if they believed that these factors played a role in their hiring. The same is true of the graph on the left, the chart on the left, you're right. But those are retention factors. So as you can see from these 2 graphs at the bottom that compare the client responses in red with the employer responses in blue, the biggest discrepancy for hiring was factor number 3, which was the company understanding of the barriers facing formerly incarcerated people. And in the retention response, the biggest discrepancy was in factor 5. What I found was that 92% of employers stated that they hire formerly incarcerated workers because of a desire to help the community. However, just 36% of workers agreed that their employer's desire to help the community made a difference in their hiring. In that same vein, 78% of employers stated they understood their employees' barriers to employment, but only 14% of employees agreed with them. Both groups agreed that America Works was critical in the hiring process. However, more clients believed that America Works was helpful in the retention process than employers did. Additionally, 85.7% of clients surveyed stated they were less likely to be rearrested because they were working. So there's a few major disconnects between what employers and employees believe enables them to be successful. Primarily, employees do not believe that their employers are as concerned about the welfare of the community as they claim to be. And employees found employment intermediaries more important in the retention process than employers did. Finally, client responses reaffirmed the known connection between work and reduced recidivism. The recommendations that I've formed based on these conclusions is that employers should be more intentional about communicating their mission with employees. There's a growing conversation about corporate social responsibility and ethical hiring, but a lot of this isn't being translated and felt by the employees. And so the first step for employers is to really make sure they are communicating that with the folks that work for them. And secondly, employment agencies should encourage ongoing contact between job developers and employers post-hire so that these intermediaries can mitigate any conflicts that might arise post-hire. And with that, I'm going to introduce Sana Johnson, who will speak to us about the gig economy. Thank you.
Now, when I refer to the gig economy, I'm talking about informal work arrangements where workers are not classified as employees, but rather independent contractors or freelancers, and I'll use those terms interchangeably. So there's been a lot of research on the gig economy recently because of how quickly and to the extent at which it has grown in the US and all around the world. I did realize, though, that there was a gap in the research in how individuals receiving public assistance have engaged with this type of work. So my project is really meant to kind of bridge that gap and get some real data in so people can begin to understand how we can make this economy more inclusive. I focused on 3 research questions. The first was meant to kind of get a picture of how this population has interacted with freelance work in the past. And the second two are geared towards the future. So how can we best support this population if they are interested in undertaking this type of informal work arrangement? I predicted 3 things. The first would be that most clients surveyed would have had some type of former experience working in the gig economy. The second, that individuals surveyed would be interested in pursuing gig work in the future, and that in order to successfully complete that work, they would need some sort of training or support to be successful in the gig economy. I used an anonymous survey of Manhattan Career Advance clients, and I had 100 responses. My data confirmed my hypotheses in part. The first one was not supported. Turns out that most clients did not have previous experience working gig jobs. The second two were confirmed, though, that once provided information on what a gig job is, most individuals were in fact interested in pursuing this type of work in the future, specifically though while in pursuit for full-time work, and that's really important. I'll come back to that later. And then the last one is that clients who are interested in gig work did confirm that they would require some type of support to be able to be successful. This leads me to 3 main conclusions. The first one is that there's a huge untapped population of individuals who could be really successful at this type of work, but might not feel like it's accessible to them yet. The second is that there's an opportunity for career service providers to get really creative with their training curricula and develop materials that can help support this population. And third, that clients still view full-time work as their ultimate goal, but view gig work as kind of a tool to prepare them for full-time work and to be able to retain a full-time job. This leads me to 3 recommendations. The first is that gig work can be counted as one of the 15 recognized work activities in New York, so that individuals in job training services programs can receive credit for the work that they are doing in the gig economy. The second is that career service providers can expand their trainings and get into those really creative curricula to support gig workers. And the third is that job platforms, I'm thinking Uber, Lyft, can really get creative and work with career service providers to develop the mutually accepted employment verification forms that will allow, again, gig workers to receive credit for their work. This is kind of a nod to the administrators in the room. We all know it's really important to be able to track clients' work activities. So if job platforms can work closely with career service providers to make sure that that can be done, there is real opportunity for a unique type of on-the-job training. With that, I will pass it off to Allison, who will talk about SNAP.
Great, so thank you, Sana. So my research focused on food accessibility and shopping preferences among SNAP recipients. So currently 12% of our population qualifies as food insecure, which means they have limited access to enough food for an active and healthy lifestyle. In Washington, D.C., 11% of the city qualifies as a food desert, which means there's limited access to healthy food options, and 82% of those food deserts are located in the most economically disadvantaged portions of the city, wards 7 and 8. SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, provides benefits to low-income households to help them purchase food, and there's a variety of federal programs that aim to expand access to healthy food options for SNAP recipients, including the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, which aims to increase the number of healthy food retailers in low-access communities, the Food Insecurity Financing Initiative, which aims to increase the consumption of fruits and vegetables with incentives, the online pilot program proposed in 2014, which would allow SNAP recipients to use their benefits online, and America's Harvest Box, proposed in 2018, that would deliver a box of predetermined foods to recipients' residents. So I had 3 research questions that informed my project. First, how these programs I mentioned align with the shopping preferences of SNAP recipients. Second, if where a recipient lives affects food security and access. And third, if employment affects a SNAP recipient's preference on where to shop for food. I predicted that the majority of the respondents in my survey would qualify as food insecure, and that those levels would be higher among respondents living in wards 7 and 8. Also, that satisfaction with the number of retailers near where a recipient lived would be lower among those respondents in wards 7 and 8. I also predicted that the majority of respondents would prefer to purchase food with SNAP at a grocery store, and that they would value choices of what to buy the most when deciding where to shop. My survey was distributed through America Works of Washington, D.C., and partner organizations that had SNAP education and training programs, and I had 42 responses. So I found that the majority of respondents in my survey did qualify as food insecure, and that those levels of food insecurity were higher among those economically disadvantaged populations in wards 7 and 8. I also found that the majority of respondents were satisfied with the number of retailers near where they lived that accepted SNAP, although satisfaction was slightly lower among wards 7 and 8. In addition, I found that the majority of respondents overwhelmingly preferred to shop at grocery stores, and that there was no large difference between the preferences of respondents in their current situation and their preference if they were to become employed. Also, the majority of respondents were unwilling to use non-SNAP income to pay for membership or delivery fees associated with online grocers. And finally, the majority of respondents, despite the popularity of grocery stores, said that they would be encouraged to visit small-scale retailers like farmers markets or convenience stores due to incentive programs like Feeney. Moving on, the majority of respondents valued convenience of location over choices of what to buy, healthy food options, and supporting local businesses when deciding where to shop with SNAP benefits. And convenience was valued more when employment was considered, while healthy food options were valued less. So based on these results, I concluded that the location may affect food insecurity and access in Washington, D.C., and employment does not appear to affect the preferences regarding the method for which SNAP recipients prefer to shop for food. However, employment does appear to increase the value placed on convenience of retailer location at the expense of the value placed on healthy food options available. Also, the online pilot program was unpopular when SNAP recipients were asked to use their own money to pay for associated fees, and incentive programs can encourage SNAP recipients to shop at small-scale retailers. So based on these conclusions, I have a few recommendations. First, that there's a federal focus on HFFI and Feeney to target retailers in locations that are convenient to SNAP recipients and focus on improvements and incentive programs rather than just building new stores. Second, that there's an elimination of fees for the online pilot program, possibly through government absorption of such fees. You could also potentially coordinate drop-off points for deliveries in order to reduce costs. Third, that job service providers partner with Feeney grantees in order to disseminate information and provide connections to Feeney programs for participants. And finally, that job service providers incorporate nutrition education into job readiness training in order to ensure that healthy food options are a value that's carried forward into employment. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Gordon, who will talk about food insecurity and workforce participation.
Thank you, Allison. Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. Sarah is up here with me. I'm going to be speaking about food insecurity and its relationship to workforce participation, but Sarah's research is also very much intertwined with the health aspect of this, so I will be focusing on my research, she will focus on hers, and then we will come back together with our shared recommendations. So as Allison touched upon, food insecurity is a highly prevalent issue in our nation. In New York City specifically, about 15% of New York City households were deemed food insecure in 2016. A lot of research has shown that both poverty, unemployment, and underemployment are all strong economic determinants of food insecurity. And also research indicates that food insecurity is likely both a symptom of and contributor to the cycle of poverty. If you think about a hypothetical individual living in poverty, which is illustrated in this diagram below, someone may be living in poverty due to low or no income. They may experience a wide variety of lack of resources, including access to healthy food. This may contribute to their food insecurity status, and then may then cause a poor diet. This poor diet may cause diet-related chronic diseases, which Sarah will touch upon, and then contributing again into their inability or low ability to work, thus just continuing the cycle. So my research focused on three main questions. Just, is food insecurity an issue that America Works clients face? Is there a relationship between negative employment histories and food insecurity? And then what are some likely origins of food insecurity among this population? So I had four main hypotheses. One just being that food insecurity would be highly prevalent among this population. The second being that for food insecure individuals, there would be higher rates of long-term unemployment, and that there would also be higher rates of underemployment. And in this case, part-time employment was functioning as a type of underemployment. And then the fourth being that lacking nutrition awareness and access to healthy food are likely origins of food insecurity. So Sarah and I collaboratively developed a client health survey that we distributed to our clients in the Brooklyn, Bronx, and Manhattan locations. And we collected 179 responses from our Career Compass, Youth Pathways, and Career Advance clients. So this first slide shows that my first hypothesis was confirmed. There was a high prevalence of food insecurity among our clients. Specifically, 66.5% of clients experienced some level of food insecurity within the past 12 months. This slide focuses on my hypothesis 2 and 3. So the top, the question, how long has it been since you were last employed, to uncover durations of unemployment. And although not much of a difference between the food insecure and the food secure population, food insecure individuals were a bit more likely to experience longer durations of unemployment. The bottom portion of this slide uses the question, have you worked mostly full-time or part-time positions, to discover the relationship between underemployment and food insecurity, and this actually rejected my third hypothesis. There was not a strong relationship between part-time employment and food insecurity. This slide touches upon fruit and vegetable consumption among the food insecure individuals who deemed themselves confident in identifying healthy food choices. So a high percentage of these individuals said that they were very confident in identifying healthy and unhealthy food. However, there was a very high inadequacy of fruit and vegetable consumption according to USDA standards. So this high inadequacy of fruit and vegetable consumption may indicate that these individuals may just be lacking access to nutritious food, because although they said they are confident in identifying choices, they are for some reason or another not making these choices. So this may be contributing to their level of food insecurity. The next one, again, similarly touches upon fruit and vegetable consumption among food insecure individuals who reported that they made healthy choices in the past 2 weeks. So these individuals said that they made healthy choices, and this was then compared to their actual fruit and vegetable consumption. So there were many individuals who said they made healthy choices, but then there was a very high inadequacy, again, of their fruit and vegetable consumption. So this may be indicating a lack of awareness for these individuals of what healthy really is, and they may just not know what healthy food choices are, and then thus contributing to their food insecurity status. For my conclusions, food insecurity is clearly a prevalent issue that public assistance recipients are currently facing. Lacking nutrition awareness and sufficient access to healthy food are likely origins of food insecurity. Long-term unemployment seems to be strongly associated to food insecurity, but part-time employment in this research does not seem to be associated. So now I will pass it off to Sarah, who will talk about the health aspects of it.
Thank you, Rachel. So my name is Sarah, and I'm going to be focusing on the health aspect of that framework, that cycle that Rachel set up for us a little bit earlier. So just for some background, as of March 2018, there were 13.8 million Americans who receive either supplemental security income, SSI, or Social Security disability insurance benefits every year. This means that there are around 14 million Americans who have a disability that exempts them from a work requirement in exchange for those benefits. But it's also possible that there are many more people who either have those disabilities and do not claim those benefits, or who have health issues that don't rise to the level of creating an inability to work to qualify for SSI or SSDI. 7 out of the 10 leading causes of death in America are chronic health conditions stemming from poor diet and a lack of exercise. And it is the least educated and poorest Americans who are most vulnerable to developing those chronic health issues that can either impede work or even lead to an early death, which is certainly of interest to our work working with those populations. So it's important for job placement services to understand the health issues that participants experience and to find ways to mitigate and to counteract the effects of those issues on employment. So based on that information, I developed 3 separate questions. First, is poor health associated with negative employment outcomes? Second, what kinds of health issues do America Works clients experience? And third, what leads to differences in health and health behaviors? Based on those questions, I came up with these 3 hypotheses. First, poor health is associated with negative employment outcomes. Second, health issues stemming from poor diet and a lack of exercise account for an outsized proportion of health issues reported overall. And third, differences in education can account for differences in health indicators and outcomes. And as Rachel said, we developed a survey together, but I just really want to highlight for this portion of the research, none of the people we surveyed are recipients of SSI or SSDI, which means that none of them claim to have a disability that would exempt them from working. So just to jump right into the results, around 7% of respondents indicated that they left their last job because of a health issue. Around 23% said that health issues impact their ability to find a job. So clearly, health is having some impact on clients' abilities to find jobs. A lot of clients said that they have some sort of a physical impairment that makes, walking for extended periods of time or standing for extended periods of time a real challenge. And so that limits the types of work that some of our clients are able to perform. And I also found, consistent with my second hypothesis, that clients with unhealthy BMIs have been out of work for longer periods of time, which we can see in figure 1 on the right. Additionally, around 2/3 of all of the respondents were classified as having unhealthy BMIs, and issues stemming from poor diet and a lack of exercise, as predicted, were extremely common among our respondents. Respondents with an unhealthy BMI also reported negative health behaviors, which we can see in figure 4 on the top. And as for the link between education and health behaviors, it was found that respondents with higher education levels exhibited more positive health behaviors, consistent with hypothesis number 3, which we can see in figure 9 on the bottom. So just to conclude, there is a connection between health and employment among those with health issues that are not considered work disabilities or may not be considered work disabilities. But it's also possible that many America Works clients, TANF beneficiaries, are eligible for SSI and SSDI benefits, but don't claim those benefits for one reason or another. In addition, health issues stemming from poor diet and a lack of exercise were the most common. Unhealthy BMI was extremely common. Differences in education can account for disparities in health and health behaviors. And also that America Works provides educational services in many ways in the way of college counseling and GED preparation means that we already may be doing some of the work that's needed to improve the health and employment outcomes of our clients. Now, Rachel and I have come up with these 2 recommendations based on our research. The first is to strengthen relations between community-based organizations, government agencies, and career service providers to establish health education curricula to really fill in the gaps created by differences in education. In addition, more outreach to clients or participants in these programs by CBOs, government agencies, and career service providers to ensure that all people who can be taking advantage of SSI, SSDI, who do have work disabilities, are fully taking advantage of those.
And our second recommendation is to research the efficacy of existing and emerging health and food security programs. So an example of this, one recent development is known as the Good Food Jobs approach. This promotes food sector jobs that are known to pay a living wage, offer safe working conditions, promote sustainable economic development, and make healthier food more accessible and secure for those in need. So this is something that is definitely being researched within the New York City area and is something that we really recommend to continue researching to promote good jobs, promote good food, and obviously promote good health. So now I will pass it on to Laurel, who will be speaking about the America Works partnership with the Brattleboro Retreat in Vermont.
Hello. So as Rachel said, I'm going to be talking about integrating vocational services into substance abuse rehabilitation, which is something that we looked at by evaluating a new partnership between America Works and the Brattleboro Retreat in Vermont. So obviously the opioid epidemic is a huge problem right now in America. It's affecting truly everybody because not only is it affecting those that are abusing and those that are close to people that are using, but it's also affecting the economy in a huge way. So firstly, it's a huge burden on our healthcare system, but also it's taking out a really big chunk of prime age citizens that would be contributing to our workforce and aren't because they're abusing opioids. And then unemployment and substance abuse are really, really closely correlated. So even though we can't explain a direction of causation necessarily, they're very highly correlated. So just looking at substance abusers, the amount of substance abusers that are unemployed is almost double the amount that are employed full-time. And then also looking at unemployment among the substance abusers, it's much, much, much higher than the general rate of unemployment in the nation. And then there are many aspects of unemployment that would lend itself to being very beneficial in treatment, including finding routine, socialization, finding a sense of purpose, income, all those things that we would typically think of as being beneficial to employment. So there have been some programs that have looked at employment as part of substance abuse treatment, and they have found to be a really, really great predictor of better outcomes, better retention of abstinence, and maintaining sobriety. So the main questions that we had, since America Works, this partnership is really new, it's really only in its 4th month, we just wanted to look at what the need of it is and whether offering these vocational services on site in the retreat can be beneficial to people that are going through substance abuse rehabilitation. So our main hypothesis was just that it would eventually be helpful, that introducing these vocational services would benefit the people going through treatment, that would open up this door for them, and that it would eventually help them maintain their sobriety. And we looked at this using a qualitative analysis, so just doing a literature review and then actually being on site, interviewing patients, interviewing physicians, and interviewing other members of the community. So what we found is basically that current resources in Brattleboro are just not available. They're not offering a clearly defined path from treatment to work. And there's just too many people that are coming into the treatment center and are not able to get help. They're not living there, they're just coming for treatment, and they're not able to find resources to help them find employment. And we actually got to speak with a patient who did not even consider work as an option until being referred to America Works by the Brattleboro retreat. He just didn't think that it was an option. He didn't think that his injury would allow him to work. He didn't think that anybody would hire him. He didn't think he had job skills. And he didn't think that receiving his benefits would allow him to work. But then as we opened up this door for him, as we spoke to him about possible employment, he's been learning job training skills and meeting new people, and he's now really, really excited about entering the workforce. So our main takeaways from that is that America Works is already helping a client or multiple clients maintain their sobriety. We spoke to the client. He already doesn't feel like he's going to go back to using because he has work and he has this new life and he has a new way to meet people. And America Works is filling a really, really unique role. So America Works is not bound by the state lines like a lot of the other companies and providers there are. So that's a huge benefit. It can reach a much wider population. And also that America Works' location is really, really critical to its success. So America Works being located actually in the retreat is hugely important for its success because it just takes away that whole barrier of after going through treatment, the patient needing to go out and find a new vocational service and make the time to go. And that whole barrier of motivation isn't there when the physician is able to just directly walk the patient over to America Works' door and start getting them treatment immediately, or start getting them vocational services immediately. So in terms of recommendations, my first recommendation would be if America Works could offer vocational different variations of work. So there have been a few programs that have tried integrating these vocational services into treatment. And one of the things that they've looked at is these different types of work training programs. So either volunteer work or subsidized training programs. And that's been really beneficial because it's kind of a trial period to see if the patients are ready to start working. And it's also really beneficial for the employer because it's much less of a risk. So also if we were able to offer these work variations, it might be easier for physicians to feel comfortable referring to us, knowing that their patient would have more support and more of a trial. And then the other thing would be to formalize the physician to America Works referral. So right now, America Works is completely dependent on the physician deciding when the patient is ready for work and ready for employment, and that makes it so that America Works isn't able to reach a big enough population quite yet. So with that, I will hand it over to Jonathan, who will be talking about housing and other governance structures.
Tenant associations and housing cooperatives, which I believe is an incredibly important topic because you don't hear too much about it in news or research, but you do hear a lot about it if you talk to local organizations and what they're trying to do with their communities. So for anyone who's not familiar, I want to define the terms. Tenant associations are groups of residents that come together to jointly represent their interests and, if needed, collectively bargain with the landlord. On the other hand, housing cooperatives are entities in which the people living in housing not only live there, but they also own and manage the housing and do not have a need for a landlord. A lot of people like these organizations because they offer residents increased control and or ownership over their housing, and they've been shown to increase financial well-being and sense of community among residents. So this paper is going to focus on how tenant associations and housing cooperatives impact residents and their housing situation. And to do so, I have created 4 hypotheses to determine whether tenant associations and housing cooperatives can lower housing costs, improve housing stability, increase access to employment, and increase access to education. To test these hypotheses, I utilized Washington, D.C. as a case study and surveyed clients in our America Works office in D.C. I received 105 completed surveys, which provided key details on residents and key information about their housing situation. The first noticeable result that I found was how widely known these tenant associations and housing cooperatives were and how widely they were used. The short answer is not too widely. And as you can see, 65% of people had never even heard of a tenant association, and only 17% of people lived in buildings with tenant associations. And even of that 17%, only a third of them were actually engaged in those tenant associations. And numbers were even lower for housing cooperatives, where 77% of people had never even heard of these organizations, and only 5% lived in them. So clearly both these organizations have low public profiles and aren't used too frequently, at least within our sample. Next, I tested whether having a tenant association, being an active member in a tenant association, and living in a housing cooperative would impact the stability, the cost, access to employment, and access to education. And on all fronts, these organizations failed to demonstrate a strong correlation with the metrics used, including rent, housing turnover, and whether or not someone was working or a student. Of course, this very likely could be due to the fact that we had so few respondents who were members of these organizations, so maybe our available sample size just wasn't big enough. Nevertheless, these results are meaningful. So we can now see that these tenant association and housing cooperatives have low public profiles and aren't used too frequently, at least within our sample size. And since they're underdeveloped and we can't support the hypotheses with any statistical significance, it may just mean that these organizations aren't developed enough and it's too early for us to tell how they can impact a city like DC. Nevertheless, I do have some recommendations about how to move forward with these organizations because they do have such promise from past studies. First, any serious attempt to start and grow these organizations is going to require housing advocates to provide education to increase awareness, just because people don't know what they are. Second, just as so few people know what these organizations are, even fewer people know how to run them. So it's important to offer technical assistance and resources by the local governments and community-based organizations for people interested in these organizations. Lastly, it's important to establish an appropriate legal framework for these organizations to operate within. People in tenant associations need to be able to effectively, collectively bargain with a landlord, and people who want to start housing cooperatives need to be able to collectively purchase land. So moving forward, I think it's important to conduct more smaller scale studies in areas where these organizations are more densely concentrated, and as they continue to grow, we can conduct larger scale research projects in order to determine how that they can impact a city and potentially address these housing issues that have plagued our country for too long. Now, I would like to introduce Ivana Osmanovic, and she's going to talk about domestic violence and economic empowerment in low-income populations.
Hey everyone. So I'm going to be speaking about domestic violence and economic empowerment in low-income populations, as Jonathan said. Out of the different types of abuse that fall under domestic violence, I chose to focus on economic abuse, and it is when a survivor and a victim of domestic violence has little to no access to personal finances, identification that could lead to employment, and even having a job. So many times an abuser, one of the control tactics that they'll use is they won't let the survivor to obtain employment because that's a sense of independence. About 50 to 60% of women who are on welfare experience abuse in a relationship. That could be physical, emotional, psychological, any type. However, 99% of those cases do involve economic abuse as well. So that led me to ask, well, how do we help these women specifically achieve financial independence? And many studies actually suggested that financial empowerment is a solution in helping survivors of domestic violence regain control of their lives in the long term by helping them succeed in independence. As I said, these statistically high numbers really inspired me to ask the following two questions. Do individuals stay in an abusive relationship because of economic dependence on their abuser? And how do agencies who connect individuals on public assistance to employment help survivors of domestic violence? I predicted that if a survivor of domestic violence is experiencing low income status, then they are more likely to stay in an abusive relationship due to economic dependence on the abuser. However, due to the sensitivity and confidentiality of the topic, it wouldn't have been fair to ask our clients to self-identify as victims and survivors of domestic violence. So instead, I chose to conduct an interview with an economic empowerment supervisor here in New York City, along with an extensive literature review. I got the opportunity to speak with Kenzie, an economic empowerment supervisor who works for a domestic violence agency serving a low-income population here in New York City. And I asked her, and it was really great because I got to get a lens into her world. And one of the things she really stressed was the reality of financial abuse. And Kenzie said this following quote, "Financial abuse is very, very real. The abuser might have access to everything financially, which is more than just a person's physical body, where the abuser has all the documents, they are locked up." She continued to say how essentially many of her clients don't have access to transportation, housing, or childcare because of the finances that the abuser does have. Later on, we got to talking about job retention. And she said, we've seen people lose their jobs because abusers don't want them to work. They want them at home, they want them with the kids, they don't want them having any access to transportation, housing, and like I said, any of those resources, because that is a sense of independence and that is a control tactic many abusers do use. When asking Kenzie what she did with her clients to help empower them and to gain financial independence away from their abuser, she talked to me about a 7-week curriculum that is based around economic empowerment. And fortunately, this curriculum is tailored to the clients. So essentially, if they want to talk about taking out loans in their own names or opening up bank accounts in their own names, something where the abuser isn't going to find out that they have this pocket of money that allows them to achieve independence, that's essentially what we spoke about. In conclusion, women who are in an abusive relationship are more likely to experience economic hardship due to the lack of resources, which is known as economic self-sufficiency. And economic self-sufficiency is when a victim or survivor of domestic violence doesn't have access to resources such as housing, transportation, healthcare, any sort of that, because they don't have that personal finance or financial independence. Financial independence can help survivors of domestic violence gain back control of their lives and is critical to leaving an abusive relationship because of the resources a survivor can access, which essentially helps them lead them to safety. Getting their own house, getting their own childcare, getting them away from their abuser and into a different place. Some recommendations for the future, moving forward, it would be great to encourage workforce vendors to create partnerships with domestic violence agencies to offer more holistic approaches, services to participants experiencing abuse. With those partnerships, clients are very much more likely to actually attend those classes and those sources at those agencies. A second one is to integrate financial empowerment curriculum specifically for victims and survivors of domestic violence for the mere fact that it creates awareness, recognition, and acceptance of the issue of domestic violence because it is very sensitive and confidential still. And lastly, having an on-site domestic violence counselor who can help the needs of clients searching for employment right away on site. That way they don't have to get on a train, that way they don't have to go somewhere and worry about running into their abuser. That need is met immediately on site. And I'd like to welcome Mikaela and Kate, who will be speaking about financial literacy training and financial access opportunities.
Thank you, Ivana. As she said, we study financial literacy trainings and financial access opportunities for low-income populations.
Okay, so we chose this topic because America Works was particularly interested in exploring potential opportunities to start financial literacy trainings here at America Works, potentially with the incorporation of mobile banking applications. This comes from a lot of research on the topic. As you can see here, financial literacy has often been linked to both positive financial behaviors and workforce development. The quote in the top right mentions how low-wage workers are actually more likely to work longer hours and earn higher wages once they receive financial literacy education.
Studies have shown that the lowest levels of financial literacy is most prevalent in low-income populations. Additionally, these populations are also more likely to be unbanked or underbanked, meaning that they do not have they have little to no institutionalized financial services, which can be seen on the chart on the bottom. In order to conduct this study, we explored 2 questions. The first being, what is the relationship between financial literacy trainings and self-reported competence in 3 financial knowledge areas: credit score, interest, and the benefits and services available on public assistance.
And our second question was exploring the relationship between these financial literacy trainings and self-reported interest in mobile banking applications.
We hypothesized first that there would be a positive relationship between the financial literacy trainings and the self-reported competence in the 3 financial knowledge areas.
And our second hypothesis is that there would also be a positive relationship between the financial literacy trainings and interest in mobile banking.
In order to conduct this study, we first developed and then taught a financial literacy curriculum, which covered a wide range of topics from financial literacy knowledge, behaviors, and services. We then taught this curriculum at America Works locations in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Staten Island offices.
We gathered data by administering surveys to almost 300 participants, and those surveys came both before and after the training, and the surveys contained questions regarding financial literacy and access of the participants.
The results of our study showed a statistically significant increase in the confidence of comprehension in our 3 areas. As you can see on the graph right here, the pre-training scores are seen in blue and the post-training scores are seen in red, with the most significant increase in the benefits and services category.
We also found an increased interest in using mobile banking applications following the training, as you can see in the graph on the right.
We also had some additionally interesting findings that were not originally hypothesized. First, we found a high number of unbanked clients. Specifically, 56% of our clients did not have bank accounts. And out of that 56%, almost 70% of them were interested in opening a bank account.
Another interesting thing that we found that was prior to the training, a lot of the participants had engaged in alternative financial services, which are often considered to be predatory among low-income populations. So as you can see here, we did find use of loan sharks, pawn shops, and check cashers, but the highest category by far was check cashers. You can see a large number of our participants did use check cashers prior to the training. So in conclusion, we were able to accept both of our hypotheses, and essentially our results told us that financial literacy trainings do have a positive impact on these populations.
Our recommendations following this study would be, first, the use of incentives for completion of this training. A large limitation of our study was that not enough clients completed the training in full. Therefore, use of incentives, whether it be financial or programmatic, meaning providing childcare, providing additional services that can help them attend the class, would be useful for them to finish the class and then, most importantly, take the information later on.
We also recommend that these financial literacy trainings contain some sort of financial technology. America Works is actually partnering right now with a company called Inclusive Capital to provide a mobile banking platform that will incorporate banking, savings, and financial literacy elements that our clients will actually be able to use in the future to increase these levels of financial literacy and access both now and once they attain employment.
Lastly, we urge for continued research with this population, specifically in the areas of incorporating the financial services and incentives as we previously spoke about, and additionally identifying the factors that make our clients interested in opening a bank account or using these mobile banking apps. It's very important to continually try to better engage this population, especially so when they finally are stably employed, they can utilize this information and take it with them in the future. Thank you so much. Next, we have Tyler Leighton to talk about the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyler with America Works Milwaukee location, and I'm here today just to discuss a little bit about my research on the Earned Income Tax Credit and how that applies to our clients in practice. So just a little bit of background about the Earned Income Tax Credit. This is the largest cash benefit program effective in the United States. In fiscal year 2016, over $60 billion in benefits were created. Sorry, I realized I was a little too close to that. $60 billion in benefits. It is unique among public assistance programs in its pro-work structure. And as you can see in the chart, as your earnings increase up to a certain point, so does the credit amount.
which does add to your effective net wage. But there's quite a bit of debate over the actual efficacy of the EITC. There's a lot of studies that do indicate that it's effective at drawing people into the labor force and increasing labor market participation. Other studies are, others aren't quite so sure about that. Some argue that the incentive effects, that there's negative incentive effects with, the government sort of giving cash benefits to people, which effectively does happen with the EITC. There's also, arguments, not enough of the population is actually aware about the credit in order for it to be effective. In order for it to be effective, clients have to know, A, that it's linked to earnings, and you have to work in order to earn it. Lastly, there's evidence that there's quite a bit of fraud in the program, so that would also undermine effectiveness. So my research primarily focused on the awareness aspect of the credit. So I posed a few specific research questions. First, how aware are AmericaWorks clients of the ITC and how it actually functions? Second, for those who are aware, how did they actually find out about it? What was that mechanism of finding out about it? Third question is, does awareness of the ITC actually impact clients' propensity to either find work or vary their work efforts? And finally, how can policymakers and other organizations really leverage the ITC to effectively promote work, which was its original mission when it was founded? So my hypotheses were the following. I did predict that a majority of clients would know or have some awareness of the credit, but I felt that a minority would know about its precise functioning, and by that there's a link between their earnings and the credit amount. Second, among those who are aware of the EITC, that a majority discovered it through tax preparation organizations, filing through their own taxes, word of mouth, and other community-based organizations. And then finally, among those who are aware of the EITC, it wouldn't really have much of an effect on labor market entry, but it would act as a positive incentive for those who are currently employed to continue working or increase their work intensity. So I kind of employed a mixed methodology. I did distribute a survey to incoming WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act participants at our Milwaukee AmericaWorks location. I also conducted several in-person interviews with different tax preparation organizations, W-2 case managers, and AmericaWorks colleagues in order to inform my research. And my results were generally pretty consistent with my hypotheses. A majority of clients did show some awareness of the ITC, but when I asked in the survey for them to explain how the credit functions, only a minority could sort of say that it's linked to work or linked to their earnings. Second, methods of awareness, generally yes, tax preparation. Among those who could actually explain in the survey the actual functionality, that functionality was higher. In talking to caseworkers and tax preparation organizations, they did sort of state that when clients do find out about the credit and how it functions, they might show a diagram of it and explain to clients. That does affect their behavior in the sense that clients will actively, once they know about it, actually change their behavior to maximize that. So that does show both pro and anti-work effects depending on what their income was previously. Finally, a majority did indicate that after using an EITC estimator that they would actually be more likely to work or continue working. So my conclusion was clients, they're generally aware, but they just don't have that concrete awareness. They do usually discover it through those tax preparation agencies, and organizations are pretty inconsistent in their the amount of information that they provide about the credit when I ask them. So there's not really much marketing out there about it, which was kind of interesting to me. Pro and anti-work effects among those already working, like I said, people try to maximize that amount, so it just depends on where they were income-wise before. And then finally, awareness efforts could be effective at promoting work. So I had a few recommendations. I kind of feel like workforce development agencies in AmericaWorks can really serve as that link between the EITC and its mission of promoting work, specifically by increasing awareness, reminding telling clients about it, explaining it to them, maybe incorporating it into employment plans, and also consistently reminding them about it. That way, it's they know what it is and that they're consistently aware of it, and so that it might impact their behavior more. And then my second set of recommendations are a few policy changes. I did recommend that we, across all dependent groups, increase that income threshold for when the credit maximum is attained. The reason I sort of suggest this is just some people will drop out of the labor force just to get that maximum credit amount. So if you kind of extend it more, it's effective in sort of extending that carrot out further. Second, sort of make the receipt of the credit be a labeled consecutive paychecks to be sort of the default mechanism that clients claim it. That way that they're more aware of it and cognizant of it. And then finally, sort of mandate that discussion of the credit and its functionality among all tax preparers. So that concludes my presentation. I did want to end this. We did want to thank all of our research advisors on behalf of all of the fellows. So if we could just give them a round of applause.